chica with that monkey. Don't sit back up by that bar stick. This been all with that monkey. My goose got my back as sparky. No trees, garden, she won't be. I'm starving, no teeth. Like Marvin, no breathe. I'm a liar. Feeling I wanna that get sparky. Chica with the darky.
We can start.
What do you think?
Oh, so you're feeling sparky, I'm guessing.
Exactly.
I like this. I would like to introduce, first of all, what we are doing to everyone. So I will share my screen for a minute and welcome everybody. So let me share my screen. Oh, interesting. Yes. Open. Oh. Zoom. Okay. Oh, that's not happening. Okay, maybe I can't share my screen because it's telling me it's gonna end the conversation. But
Zoom, why?
I don't know. It's like share screen. It's like no, then I will end the conversation. Zoom is moving like Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sharing. Okay, I think you can see what I'm trying to share.
Yes.
Can you see what I'm sharing? Good. Oh. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. I'm sharing with you. Can you see my screen, Ifeanyi?
I can, yes.
Oh, perfect. So I'm sharing with you conversation and the presence of the Igbo Empress. That's what I call you, Ifeanyi, with all of us. Welcome to Colorful Conversation. It's a series of conversation, discussion, interviews, but I wouldn't like to call them interviews, more like a storytelling conversation between myself and all the dope, amazing African women in their different part of life that are just doing their own thing, living their life. And it's a way to kind of tell their story, because I believe that stories matter and stories are what we get to know about human being. And it's the way we document movement, the way we document our existence here. And I want a space that archive and also document the existence of African women across different lifetime, but also whatever they're doing in different fields. And today we have the privilege and honor to be in the presence of glorious Empress energy, Libra energy, energy I think that I personally would call very high priestess, but also empress, in the way that we learn constantly from you, but also empress because you birth things. You are a creator. You're creating so many things. You create Africa Salon, as I was talking to you earlier. You created a whole series of poetry on your page that you also share. And the way you kind of talk is just very much, for me, reminded me that African girls, women, are taking up spaces in places that people don't think we belong, but we just do that so gracefully and easily and say, this is a space that I think I belong, and you don't get to tell me any different, both in academia and the arts. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for
we will be, so just to give out the layout, which is why I'm sharing my screen, is I have done the brief intro, and then we will go directly into the conversation of who is Ifeanyi Awachie, and then we'll go about their journey, like your journey throughout, from the very beginning that you want to share with us till now. How have you navigated being a perfectionist, and what do you actually share with us and what you don't share with us? Because also there's this notion of like, oh, I know you because I follow you on social media, but you don't. And I would like us to get to know you from what you feel at this present moment represents you and you would like to share with us. And then I'll ask 3 questions to kind of navigate that space of your journey, your evolution, who you are, and what you want to see in the future happen. And then we'll take questions from the audience. And there is something beautiful that I have for the last is a colorful ending. I'll tell you what it is when we get to colorful ending. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can get to you and give you the spotlight.
Amazing. Thank you, Adiola. I'm so happy and blessed to be here. I'm so grateful for the invitation, especially because it is exactly 10 days from my birthday. And leading up to this conversation, I've been reflecting a lot on my life and who I am. And it just feels like such a gift to be able to be in this space with you, especially now. And I wanted to say hi to the familiar names on the call because I feel like I kind of know everyone. So Seema, hello. Keela, thank you for coming. Oleg, I believe I think I met Oleg at the ICA just before the pandemic. So it's good to see you.
It's good to see you all. So hello, everyone. And you get to ask us questions directly when we get to the section where the audience can ask any question that you want to ask to Ifeanyi. And also this will be shared online just to say that this is being recorded. And if there is a reason you don't want your face to show or your name, that's also fine. You can take your name off the screen or you can leave your camera off. So thank you so much. So the first question, I think, then I'll go deep into it and dive deep.
Yeah.
You give life to Africa Salon. Yes. You gave life to your curation work. You curate work, you've worked in different big institutions, but who are you when those institutions do not exist? Let's assume that they don't. Who are you when you wake up in your intimate circle, like people who are close to you? Who would they say you are?
Ooh, wow. So I am going to maybe start by kind of giving a story of my journey, because I think that kind of answers the first question, but I love that that question of, who are you when you wake up? So I think I might specifically answer that separately, but I was born in Nigeria. I was born in Igbo land in Nsukka, where my parents were teachers. And I think there's something about where I was born, because Nsukka, as I'm sure you know and others know, is a college town in eastern Nigeria. It's home of, the Nsukka, I believe the Nsukka art school or artist group. And so there's something about those roots and my later journey into creativity that I've been thinking about lately and trying to discover more about. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my throat today. I've got like a sexy smoker's voice going on, which doesn't make sense. But I immigrated to the U.S. with my parents when I was a year and a half old, and we first moved to California and then moved to Atlanta, where I grew up and where my 4 siblings were born. So I am an eldest daughter. I'm the daughter of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself in a way. And I think from a really young age, I was raised to be a perfectionist. My parents had very high standards for me. I'm sure people can relate here. My whole life, I can remember being told, when you go to Stanford or when you go to Harvard, when you do your PhD, which I'm doing now after much resistance, but that's a different story that maybe we'll get to later. So from an early age, I always knew that my parents' expectation for me was to do great things. And I also understood that they moved to the US so that my siblings and I could have better experiences than they had, and the best possible experience that the U.S. had to offer in terms of education, quality of life, etc. So that kind of hung over my head my whole life. And I also felt, as the oldest child and as the half immigrant, half first generation child, I was acutely aware of the sacrifice my parents had made in immigrating. I've been reflecting a lot on that, especially this year, especially through therapy, and just realizing how much I absorbed as a child and how much I kind of put pressure on myself to get through things, handle things myself, take care of myself, take care of my siblings, minimize my problems, so that, because I saw how hard my parents were striving to make a life for us in the States, you know what I mean? So I think that is a big part of the roots of my perfectionism. And so I've always been a very high achieving student and all that boring stuff. Have never really liked school, but I've always liked learning about the things I am interested in. So I always hated going to school, waking up early every day. And when I could, I would get away with doing, my homework as quickly as possible and things like that. But at the same time, I was a really curious child, and I have a wonderful, wonderful mother who exposed me and exposed my siblings to a lot. She took us to public libraries all the time. I'm sure, I'm not alone in that experience to some degree. And she took us to museums, and she was constantly exposing us to film from different countries and different places, and spending a lot of time with us, reading with us. So that was kind of a rich foundation for my learning at school and outside of school. And I also rebelled because I was not really into school, and I was not really, as much as I knew what the expectations were for me, I felt like following the path my parents were setting would not allow me to be my true self or my full self. Um, so I remember being really into kind of like punk and emo like culture in middle school, which might be surprising to people. But I was really into the internet back in the day and found a lot of community there because in Atlanta, I grew up in the suburbs. And there were not a lot of people around me thinking about things in different ways, thinking with a critical lens, being interested in culture from elsewhere. You know what I mean? So I really found that community online, and along the way, got interested in things that, maybe little black girls, little African girls don't usually get interested in. But I was also aware and sensitive to the whiteness of those spaces. So they didn't quite feel like me, but I identified with certain things like music. I grew up on indie rock. I love that stuff. I love alternative music. It's less what I listen to now, but that was a very big part of my life in my kind of middle school, high school years. And yeah, I kind of identified with the music and found community through my interest in that music in different ways. For example, I remember in middle school, knowing about obscure music and indie music was a way that I spoke to boys, because I did not always, especially as a young black girl who was like, who didn't always feel desirable, who was like, you know, not heavy, but not skinny, just didn't have like a body or anything that was like conventionally beautiful. And I was acutely aware of this, even though I didn't have the language for it. I was trying to look for other ways to connect with people on different levels. So talking to boys through the currency of music taste, and trying to connect with my classmates. I went to a Catholic school in middle school, so I tried to connect with classmates through my knowledge of different things, because there were huge class differences between me and other students, and that was a huge part of my kind of formative years, like navigating that. And so through that period as well, I knew that my main goal in life had to be getting into a great university. That was, as I said before, my parents' whole sermon and word for me, my whole life. And I hated it. I was planning to go to a tiny liberal arts New England school in protest, like a really obscure women's college that was very artsy. I think there one I had my heart set on was like Oberlin College or something like that. And I was just rejecting, the Ivy League aspirations my parents had for me. But then I went to a presentation that, schools like Yale give to try to entice students. And I heard the way that this man was talking about the enthusiasm that Yale students had for their studies and the opportunities that they explored outside the classroom. And, especially in light of what I said before about not really being into school as an idea, but being into learning in different ways and actually really being into the things I was into. Something appealed to me really deeply, and I kind of fell in love with Yale before even getting there. So my goal became to get into Yale, and I studied so hard to get into Yale. My whole life was school, home, church, for my high school years. So I did not party, I did not do drugs in high school, I did not do anything cool. I was not cool. Well, I was cool in the sense that I was really outgoing and friendly, and so people liked me for that reason. And I had all these different friends in very different circles, but I wasn't popular in the sense of like going to parties and things like that at all. So I finally got into Yale, and I had honestly the happiest 4 years of my life there. And I went on this journey where I was trying to still follow my parents' dreams. They wanted me to go to law school. So I went into Yale thinking I need to find a way to get into law school and study something that I'm interested in, but that will be applicable to law school. And so I started studying linguistics because I thought I'm really into languages. This is kind of this is as scientific as you can get in the kind of humanities without doing something boring, you know? So I convinced myself I was going to study linguistics. And then one summer I was interning at an NPR station, National Public Radio station in Atlanta. And I was really enjoying my work. I was working for their news department, so I was starting to report stories and go around town and do journalism and work in journalism through this audio medium, this audio format, which was so interesting to me. And so I came home one day just buzzing, just glowing from the thrill of my work. And I remember my parents were sitting in the living room, and I went into the living room and said, "Mom, Dad, I have something to tell you. I think I want to switch my major to English." And that was going to be my way to, I know you already know what's coming by the look on your face. That was going to be my way to prepare for a career in journalism and radio journalism in particular. And I kid you not, like, you can't make this shit up. My parents both let out a sigh of just despair in that moment, like collectively in unison. And I was so high, that I wasn't immediately dissuaded. I was like, okay, well, you guys aren't into it, but I am. So, we'll figure out how to get you to approve later. But I want to study English. And, I remind them of that to this day. And they kind of, I think my mom acknowledges it. And my dad is kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't have that reaction. But I just kind of started to take a different path at that point. And English was really my gateway drug to the arts. I ended up taking classes in creative writing, and I've always written stories for myself and always written poetry, as you now know. You've seen some of it. And I never thought I never thought that could be something to take a class in or take seriously in any way. I never thought it could be something I could make a life doing. And I took a fiction writing class and fell in love. I was like, I just want to write. I just want to study creative writing. So I did. And it's funny because my parents, though they are both very kind of left-brained in a way, like my mom they're both teachers, and my mom studied agricultural science. My dad studied organic chemistry, but they're both very creative. So I think the roots of my writing and my creativity were honestly there. It's just that I think, I don't think they had the opportunity really to fully explore their creative side. So I think I'm kind of, in some ways, like the fulfillment or like their creative side blooming in one sense. My dad has written poetry. I posted some of his poetry recently. He's always been with a camera. He's a photographer, but doesn't really, he sees it as a hobby, which is valid, but he has a skill for it. And my mom told me that she always wrote stories and has like notebooks full of stories in Nigeria that she wasn't able to bring over, but has always been creative in terms of making crafts and making things for us around the house and doing projects, coming up with activities for us. So they are creative, though they don't want to admit it. But yeah, and I realize I've been speaking for a while, so I'm going to wrap up. But just to say that,
you don't need to silence or edit yourself. The whole point of this conversation is for us to get to know you. And I like how you went your evolution story of what your parents are and how you get to America and how you get to be here. So continue, please.
And thank you for reminding me to, take up space. It's so easy to forget that's okay. But yes, so I ended up studying English and creative writing and writing tons of poetry, working with a poetry group. And then I went to Nigeria right before my final year at university. I got a grant to go because I was taking a documentary photography class, and I thought, okay, I see that one kind of concern of documentary photography is telling true stories about different contexts, different places, different people. I want to do that for Nigeria. We need that. I remember thinking, I don't even have a mental picture of Nigeria. When I Google Nigeria, I don't see the same places and experiences that my parents described to me. You know what I mean? So I know that this isn't the full story, what I'm seeing in my immediately accessible archives, you know. So I want to take those pictures. That's part of who I am as well. I'm the type of person who I like to do things and get to a solution. So I took it upon myself to go to Nigeria to get those images that I wasn't seeing. And so I got funding to do that. And I knew, you know, the other benefit of this was going to be the chance to go to Nigeria for the first time, because I had never been back since we left. And I fell in love with that country. You know, I had rose tinted lenses to an extent, but it felt so good to be home. I mean, I don't know if I even need to explain that to people on the call. And I just was so fascinated and so happy to see contemporary Nigeria, to see what life is like today. And so I took photos and I wrote about my experiences. And then I had the chance to publish a book, an ebook, kind of compiling my writings. And so that book is out there. It's called Summer in Igbo Land. And so that really kind of was the beginning of my kind of creative practice and my more formal writing. And then that trip also inspired Africa Salon, because I came back to campus after listening to music my cousins had shared with me, and experiencing, you know, Nigerian film, and then starting to notice where Nigerian fashion and art was being talked about. This was around 2013, 2014, and there was like a really special and kind of big surge of interest in contemporary African arts at that time. And so I thought, wow, a lot of places are thinking about these things. You know, Fashion Week, different fashion weeks in London and New York are paying attention to African fashion. Nigerian film is becoming better known. Nigerian music is becoming a bit better known. Why aren't we talking about this at Yale? We spend so much attention on cultures from other countries, especially Western culture. There's no question that, you know, artists from American artists and British artists should come to campus and speak to us. So why can't we do the same thing for African artists? So I ended up working at Yale and proposing this festival called Africa Salon that was going to give African artists the chance to come to campus and talk about their work, and give students like me, first generation Africans, and anyone interested, the chance to come and hear them and experience their work. And I got a crash course in curating and running festivals and running events through that experience. I mean, I had an amazing mentor called Rachel Adams, who really supported me through that period, just telling me things like, you need to think big, you need to dream big, you need to make a logistical plan for the event and how it's going to run. You need to kind of frame it, write up a framework, you know. And my dear friend Uma Ramaya, who actually put on an event earlier before Africa Salon that was a bit smaller scale, but very much inspired the festival as well, was there to, you know, haul materials across campus with me and wine and dine artists who came, take care of them, create the website. And she's so trained and skilled in communications. She really, really helped me with that side of things. And so I basically learned to be a curator from these two women. I really consider myself, you know, a self-taught curator who was guided by Uma and Rachel and Africa Salon, which I see as something that chose me. It wasn't something I chose to do so much as it was something that chose me. It came down, you know, God, they passed it down and said, I need you to do this. And so I gave birth to it, and I've been trying to take care of it ever since. And so that kind of just set me down the path toward contemporary art that I'm in now. You know, I ended up moving to London because I wanted to study more, to be able to curate Africa Salon with even more knowledge, even more knowledgeably. I wanted to, I'm doing a PhD now because I want to continue studying, but also because I want power. Because I want the power that academics have to frame things like contemporary African film, art, etc., because there's a lot of white people studying our things and getting a lot of things wrong. And getting things wrong on a nuanced level and a very blatant, very visible level. You know what I mean? So when I was doing my master's, I was just reading things that I thought were crazy interpretations of African music and film, etc. And I thought if there was an African person looking at this, thinking about this, they wouldn't get these things wrong. And we would learn so much more that I'm not even thinking about reading this. Thank you, Sheila. Reading this article or whatever it is. So after resisting my dad's desire for me to do a PhD for so many years, I turned around and said, okay, maybe I should think about it. And it was other Black women who eventually led me to really make the decision and commit. It was friends of mine, like my friend Sarah, who went to Yale, who was studying the African presence in the classics, who got to move to London the same time I did, actually, just to do research at the British Museum. And she was living in her own flat in South London. And I just thought, okay, so PhD allows you to live cute like this? Okay, maybe I should think about it. And my friend Effie, who was studying history and studying kind of South African visual history, looking specifically at mining, but moving more into fine art. And she spent a lot of time in South Africa doing that, but also curated an exhibition for Africa Salon with me. So seeing her be able to do this kind of history research and also pursue creative and curatorial interests made me think, okay, so there's some flexibility in a PhD, and you don't have to just exist in these silos and stay in the library all the time. All right, well, I didn't know that. Let me take that into consideration. And so, yeah, I think it was probably what cinched it is when I created my collective, The Politics of Pleasure, with Nadia Swaby and Rita Gale here. I almost said here in London. While I was working at the ICA, which is a place that we're not going to talk about, like you said, who are we outside of institutions? But yes, I had the gift of forming this collective with Nadia and Rita, and Nadia had finished a PhD actually at SOAS the same time I was there. Crazy that we never met. And Rita ended up starting a PhD, and hanging around with them and hearing the level of conversation that they had about everything, and hearing about their research, which is fascinating. And also getting to know them as people just made me think, okay, I can see myself as one of these Black women, and I want to be in conversation with them. I almost felt, essentially, I got peer pressured into doing a PhD. That's how I thought about it. I was like, okay, if I want to be a fabulous Black woman, I need to do this, and it will allow me to share some ideas that I have about contemporary African arts and culture. So that in short, in 30 minutes, is who I am outside of institutions.
Thank you so much for taking up the space and telling us all these amazing stories, especially talking about Black women basically kind of peer pressuring into doing what you are rebelling to not do, like getting your PhD. And my face went like this when you talk about like going to tell your parent, because Nigerian parents don't count the humanities as something viable of a career or viable of any attention. Just like, I want you to be a doctor, a lawyer, and maybe an engineer. I'll settle with that. The rest, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand that language, and you need to fix it and come back to your senses. So thank you for sharing that evolution journey. And also, wow, you are born in Nsukka. That's like a massive town for Igbo land, but also has been a tremendous campus, but also tremendous addition to Nigerian history. So my next question, before I have two more questions. So the audience is already sending in their question, which I really appreciate, and I will encourage you to continue sending more. My second question is, we're not talking about the ICA because that institution will remain outside of this beautiful conversation. And my question then is, you said to me when we had our dialogue that you are a perfectionist in recovery. Yes. How have you found ways to recover from being a perfectionist? Because I'm a perfectionist myself, and sometimes I feel like I overthink myself out of doing amazing work because I want to be perfect, when I know nothing is perfect. So what are the tips that you've been using to heal from being a perfectionist, to recover from being a perfectionist, especially like living in academia and the arts. Everything has to be perfect, right? Because you get grants only when you have a perfect idea, apparently. Anyway.
Yes. Yes, I love that you said that, because I was going to talk about something specifically about perfectionism in the arts and academia, but maybe not in a way that might be immediately apparent. But the first thing is changing my mind. Like, there's a couple of practices, and when I say practices, I mean really like concrete, like things that I do every day. It's not glamorous. It's just things that when certain things happen, I'm reminded, oh, I need to practice that skill. And one skill I need to practice is changing my mind, remembering that I have the freedom to change my mind. And these are going to be very subtle ways of thinking about perfectionism. But basically, one side effect of being raised a perfectionist, I think it's fair to say that my parents are very much perfectionists, very blatantly. One side effect is that you absorb the notion that you can't be wrong. So what you say, what you like, an opinion you spout, or if you correct someone, or a fact that you share, if it turns out you're wrong about that thing, somewhere along the way, I absorbed the idea that you just have to stand up in that, in what you said, and you can't turn, you can't pivot. You can't say, oh, wait a minute, okay, I was wrong. You can't be wrong, And so one thing I've been trying to practice is, if I make a decision, letting myself change my mind. For example, before I left London, I had a little send-off gathering. Very, not many people. We kept it as COVID safe as possible. But a friend asked if he could bring a friend to the gathering, and I at first said, "No, I just want family there. This is my send-off. Let's just keep it to the people that were intentionally invited." And then later, I thought about it. I talked to one of my best friends in the world, Mohamed Miaudu, who co-hosted the gathering with me. And his reaction was kind of like, oh yeah, why not bring somebody else? And I thought about it, and I decided, it is kind of, there are so few opportunities to gather right now. And it is a gathering at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be so constrained as I'm thinking about making it, even though I do have valid reasons for thinking, given the nature of the gathering, the occasion of the gathering, it would make sense to have a really intentional guest list. And so part of me felt like, well, you already laid down the law. Don't go back and take back what you said. Just stand up in what you said. You're right. Don't let this person feel like, oh, you're wavering. And I have this image of myself as someone who doesn't waver, who always knows, how she wants to move, how she wants to operate. And part of me wants to maintain that image. Like, I want people to see me that way. And in some contexts, that's good. But in this one, this is a gathering, this is a party, this is a social context. I thought, this other part of me that's the perfectionist in recovery said, you don't have to be perfect. There doesn't have to be this linear narrative where you knew exactly what to say and you said it. You know what I mean? So I went back to this friend and said, yeah, it's fine. Bring this person. I've changed my mind. I've decided it's okay now, and that was reserving my right to change my mind and my right not to be perfect. Another practice is that I'm actually starting with my friend. We decided that we are going to give ourselves a month every year to be messy, because we're the type to try to organize ourselves perfectly always. When we're hosting people, when we're meeting people, we make plans with people in a certain way. We try to keep things very seamless. And I really value that. It's often not returned, that effort, but we said, okay, for 1 month every year, we're going to just be messy. The word of the month is going to be messy. So it's almost like time off from being perfect. It helps to have somebody else doing it with me, so we can kind of talk to each other and process and validate for each other that this is what we're doing and it's okay. But literally, like, taking time off from doing things perfectly, or at least doing things in a very thoughtful, organized way all the time. And then the other thing I was thinking of was this realization I had this week that has to do with being perfect, especially in arts and academic spaces. Basically, yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, I had a really triggering experience. I'm part of a WhatsApp group with a lot of people in one part of the art world, and the question of an article about a Black woman that had been, experiencing, similar things to what I experienced at the ICA was shared in the group, and I expressed support for that Black woman. And the group is all Black people as well. And then it turned out that there was another Black woman in the group who also needed support, essentially. And so I felt like I had done something wrong by expressing support for the first Black woman, right? And in that moment, I felt a lot of things, but essentially I've been in spaces like that before where if you say the wrong thing, you can get canceled. You know what I mean? One of the most painful experiences of my life, which is the memory of which triggered me yesterday when this happened in the context of being in a group, actually with other Black people, and saying the wrong thing and having people clap back violently because you're not supposed to say the wrong thing. You're supposed to have the perfect, most critically examined thought at all times. You're not supposed to, give the wrong opinion. You're not supposed to give the wrong reading of something. And if you do, you deserve violence. That's the kind of climate that we're in right now, especially in certain spaces. And in that moment, with the first experience I had, I did not, first of all, have the ability to change my mind and dial back the way I do now. And I also felt like even if I tried to do that, or ask questions or seek more information or have a discussion, there was no space for that. There was no grace granted for that. So yesterday I felt that same dynamic. And as I reflected on it, because it really brought up a lot for me, and I ended up talking to friends about it and my siblings. And even this morning, I was thinking about it because it was so emotionally taxing, and I literally had a physical response. It was so physically taxing that I planned to work out yesterday and I couldn't do it. I didn't feel like doing it. And it was only this morning when I had a great workout that I realized, wow, I feel energized today. Yesterday, I literally felt physically drained by this experience of being held to this perfect standard, feeling like I had failed to meet that standard and having to process that, you know what I mean? And so I realized as I was thinking about it that there's a kind of currency in being right, especially when it comes to art spaces, academic spaces. There's a kind of currency in having the most beautifully crafted tweet. There's a kind of currency in being able to speak well about an art show, a paper, and being able to go to an exhibition and afterward, give an amazing response. Like there's a currency in having the right political opinions. And that's a currency that I trade into, at times. I'm aware of the way in which, I interact on Twitter, and sometimes I know the right thing to say to access that currency. But there's a cost to it as well, where when you aren't able to say the right thing, when you aren't able to have the perfect opinion, there's no grace. Like the stakes are very, very high. And so I've been thinking about that. And after I processed this realization, I stumbled upon a quote by Prentice Hemphill, who is a somatic practitioner and just amazing movement teacher and so many other things. And I posted the quote on my Instagram, and it was about how we need to look beyond rightness and being right and think about other things, think about seeking out other things that will actually grow us. Like instead of trying to be right all the time, what else can we try to be? What else can we try to access that will lead to more, that will lead to more pleasure, more richness, more adventure, rather than just the currency of being right?
This is amazing. Thank you so much. I think a lot of us actually lose, and you said it, like if you say the wrong thing in academia, which is interesting because academia is supposed to be a place and a space where we evolve our ideas, where we learn things and then we change our mind and we examine new things and try to discuss them and navigate them and be like, oh, actually it didn't work out, so I'm gonna go into something new. Whereas the way that we kind of function right now is the moment you said something wrong, you're perpetually done. That's it. Well, that image of the things that you said become who you are. And it seems like people just forget all the other things that you've said right, or the other time that you've said something right. And I found that really disappointing, especially when it comes in academic spaces and the art. The art is always like a mind game, actually. Is a mind game of say the right things at the right time to the right platform.
Yes.
And that is like, for me, and I don't want to talk about your experience at ICA, but for me, it makes me realize who then have the currency of being in those spaces, because people craft their responses, they craft who they are. There's a whole persona and facade to their existence. And I'm just thinking like, but then you are not real.
Exactly.
And also then this leads me to my next question to you.
Yeah.
How much do you share? Because you actually wanted to talk about this. How much do you share with the public, especially thinking about it from an academic and art space person? Like, how much do people know you, and how much do you feel like it's essential for your own sanity, but for your own safety also, to protect yourself? Because there's this thing that I see whenever I go to art event. I never want to call myself an artist, but I'm like, technically I'm a curator and programmer. So yes, but because I kind of delve into the arts and then academia and policy space, so I just like, I'm like, things differently, but there is always a facade. Like everybody wear black when they curate an exhibition. I'm like, I curate this motherfucking exhibition. Sorry for my French. I am going to wear gold. That's what I want to wear. I don't want to blend out. I don't want to not look that like I do the work. I've done the work, so I don't know why wearing black is a thing. So what do you share with us, and what do you keep to protect yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm in a moment where I'm sharing a bit more freely than I normally would, because I do feel this pressure, especially in a space like Twitter, just thinking about social media for the moment, to maintain that facade of professionalism, and I'm a curator, and I even have certain topics that I keep in mind where if the tweet doesn't pertain to those things, I won't share it. So if it has to do with Black art, African art, activism, it's okay to share. But sometimes I want to tweet about Moesha and Megan Thee Stallion. And I've started to do that more. But when I first started to do it, I was even making excuses like, well, if I'm talking about Megan and Tory, then I'm talking about violence against Black women, which has to do with Black feminism. It's informed by my Black feminist lens. That's why it's okay for me to tweet about Megan Thee Stallion. And you will not catch me tweeting about WAP, But I think I'm moving closer and closer toward being free to tweet about those things. And it's funny because I am a perfectionist in recovery, so I keep having to give myself permission. And one way that I gave myself permission recently was that a woman who just won the MacArthur grant, one of the MacArthur grants, who I follow, I noticed that she tweets about academia, but also tweets about a lot of stuff that is, just pop culture, just fun, things going on in her kitchen, her body, just a lot, everything, everything that a full human being would share, because she tweets about everything that's going on in her full human life. So I've been thinking, okay, how can I allow myself to be free and to bring more of my full self to these different spaces? And I think it's easier in academia, because in academia, you are your work in a way, whereas when you're in an institution, you are the institution. So especially when I was in an institution, I felt like I got to be careful what I say because it reflects on my employer. But especially now that I'm in academia, and after talking with a dear friend about, our different approaches to even being in the institution space, because this friend is more, doesn't always code switch in institutional spaces, dresses the way she wants to, just is much freer. I kind of looked at that approach with a lot of like hesitance. Like, I can't bring my full self to this space. I don't know how people are going to receive that. I don't know if people are going to hold me well if I bring all of myself in. And also, I don't want to share everything with people, which is the other way I think about this, because like we were talking about the other day, I do believe there's something valuable about, as CoStar told me the other day, offering very little information about yourself. So this is the other side of this for me. Like, on one hand, I see I'm appreciating more the beauty and what's to be gained in sharing yourself openly, being vulnerable, especially in public. On the other hand, I think there is something to be said for maintaining a mystique. So the more important something is, the less I talk about it, the less I share it. And that comes from a lot of things. It comes from my mom telling me that my grandfather, who's late now, was an amazing entrepreneurial mind and would talk about ideas he had as soon as he had them, only to see friends of his run away with that idea. So I learned, she said this to me when I was realizing that I would do the same thing. And what I found was the more I talked about an idea, the less energy I had to do the work to realize that idea. So talking about it directly drained the resources that I had to realize it. So I started reserving that energy and being hesitant to talk about things, waiting to talk about things until I had done the work. That for me is very important for my practice. But also because you want to protect your intellectual property. Also because certain things are precious. There's certain things that just deserve to be protected. That's part of the reason why I do code switch around white people. I don't want them to have certain things. I don't want them to have certain parts of our speech. It drives me crazy when white people use Black words. I can't, like, I wish I could think of an example off the top of my head, but there are just some things that have become, as all Black culture is, appropriated and just made everybody's property, and it kills me. I just feel like some things are sacred. And so there are some things I don't say in certain spaces for that reason. Another example is I don't share a lot of pictures of my family. I don't share any pictures of children in my family. I've stopped sharing pictures of my siblings as much. Firstly, because I don't know where they're going to end up. Secondly, because I feel like the internet doesn't deserve all that. There's certain people I want to share with. So shout out to my close friends list, but I feel like certain things are so precious. They don't, social media doesn't deserve them. Random people who stalk me don't need to see those precious moments at home with my family. You know what I mean? And I think that's something I find really intuitive about how to use this very public space that we call social media, to the point where it confuses me how some people, put their kids online and things like that. But that's not my job to worry about that. My job is to worry about myself. So that is the way that I think about, what I share of myself, and what I talk about and what I don't talk about. I am in a moment of transition where um, I'm trying to become more open, like you said, for my mental health, but also there's a lot that I keep to myself, like projects that I'm working on. The more important it is, the less I will talk about. You won't even know what's happening. I have things I'm working on right now that nobody's going to hear about for months, and some things that I'm just trying to keep sacred.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I think that sharing things, sometimes for me it's about manifesting them, but that's what your close circle exists for, and that's also your confidence exists for. But I also think that a lot of time we realize that it's also a very Nigerian thing to keep things to yourself. It's like, if it's not happening, don't trust people, because people's eyes and people's energy will come into your shit, and you don't know who wish you well and we don't know who doesn't wish you well. Another Nigeria is like, yes, so we keep things to And I agree that the internet does not deserve all of our graciousness. And one of my last question is the vulnerability that it comes with sharing something that is deeply violent and deeply, it opens you up to people critiquing you, even though you are a person that has received a very violent behavior. So talking about your experience at the ICA, when you shared that was heartbreaking. But I also think that was also empowering in a way, because you shared something so violent from such a massive institution. How did you feel sharing that?
Yeah, honestly, I felt numb, because that incident was it was a what's the image I'm thinking of? It was like the breaking point. It was not the first thing that happened, It was, I just reached a point where it wasn't new, it wasn't shocking. I didn't feel raw because it had been happening. I reached a point where I was almost numb, but at the same time, I felt anger. And I felt spurred to do something. I was inspired by the example of other people, especially other Black women who were similarly calling out different institutions. So I felt emboldened by that. And then after I posted, I waited for a moment, and it's like that moment after you put something out there and you don't know whether there's going to be massive pushback or a mixed bag. But I looked back later and saw that almost everybody who responded to me was supportive. There were not, I didn't, hear any of the voices that might have been saying, oh, what is this girl talking about? She's wrong to do this. Almost everybody who commented and reached out, from people, close friends to people I've worked with to strangers, understood, to this day when I tell this story to people, people understand how violent that incident was. And that is so affirming to me. I felt so supported, so held, so buoyed by everybody hearing me, you know what I mean? And that was part of the reason why it was so important to call it out publicly in that Twitter space than to try to address it within the institution, because I knew if I tried to address it within the institution, the complaints would just be funneled through this bureaucratic process and turned into nothing, which is what happened. I mean, the ICA, of course, the board and people felt the need to try to address it through a formal grievance process, and I had meetings with them, and they were horrible and just continued to be violent. I'm still unpacking a lot of that. And yeah, at the end of the day, they could not acknowledge that wrong had been done. And I think there's a way in which that bureaucratic system is built such that it can never acknowledge that wrong has been done, because to do that would be to acknowledge the very structure that shapes that bureaucracy. You know what I mean? The structure itself is wrong. So it would never, reach an outcome that would support me as a Black woman subject in that space. You know what I mean? So it was necessary to address it and find redress in a space where people could see me and where people understood what was going on and where there was some kind of recourse, some kind of justice that could be gained, at least, if nothing else, in being heard and in having my concerns and my experience be validated, and the validity of my experience, to have that be reflected back to me. So ultimately, I felt very empowered. And honestly, this is the most important thing that I felt. There was a moment when, and I haven't said this publicly before, but the ICA asked me to take the tweets down at one point before even starting an investigation. And I remember I had a moment where that perfectionist child in me, perceiving authority, giving me an instruction, almost got in line. That child almost said, oh my God, I need to do this thing that this authority is telling me to do. And then I thought about it for a moment, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Because if there was ever a time to speak up and stand by what I said, to not change my mind, it's now. It's this Black Lives Matter moment. It's this moment when the whole world is changing, and a moment when it's changing because of the pandemic, but also there's this reckoning that we haven't really seen before in terms of these institutions being held to account. So if I back down now, it would not sit right with me, and it would be it would not. That's not the story. That's not the legacy I want to leave. That's not how I want my story to be documented and my story to be told and my story to be played out. And I remember my immediate younger sister we're weirdly linked in certain ways, because we've had experiences at the same time at different times in our lives that were the same, and we didn't know about them. So she called out her university for racism that she'd experienced there at the same time, basically, as I was calling out the ICA. And she posted her piece that she wrote calling her university out. And one of our uncles in Nige commented that he was proud of her. And he said, timidity is not a virtue. And that just summed up how I was feeling in that moment when I decided I'm not going to back down. And when I tell you, Adeola, in that moment, I just had this sensation of being completely free. I was like, I am a free motherfucker. That's how I thought it to myself, word to Janelle Monáe. I was like, wow, there is nothing these people can do to me. I've never felt freedom like that in my life. I was thanking God. I remember I had to take a walk after I got the email that asked me to take the tweets down. So I was walking and thinking and huffing and puffing, processing, got on the phone with a colleague who was a huge ally to me during the process. And over the course of that phone call, I was like, no, I'm not going to take them down. And my next thought was, I'm free. And it was a beautiful, clear day. I was walking by water, and I just thought, what a powerful moment. Like, I'm powerful. like, there's nothing, nobody can do anything to me ever again because I've stood up in this moment, and I'm going to take this energy into every other experience I have. I'm free.
Yes. Oh, wow. You are free. Seriously. I mean, not to talk about the institution itself, but the violence that is coming from this kind of institution. I quit a very toxic violent space, and I said, I'm done. I don't want to be here. You don't deserve me. And that gave me so much freedom, and it creates space for something beautiful. It creates space for me to be right here in West Africa, because if I had to stay at those toxic places, I won't be able to come home. And just what you say about being home is healing in itself. Being able to say, no, actually, I don't want to be it. And you don't get to tell me what to do, because you are the perpetrator of the violence, but you don't get to tell me how I handle this violence or how I unpack it. So way to go for your freedom. I mean, seriously, there is a lot to say for when you brought that trait out. A lot of people that I know in the arts world who have worked with that specific person saying, oh, this is not the first time this has been happening. And like, having heard about multiple people talk about the same person, I'm just like, you know what? If the arts world decide not to do anything about it, I am very happy and proud that you said your piece.
Exactly.
You spoke your truth, and your truth is what matters. And I am very grateful for you thinking about yourself and your legacy and putting yourself first. That's my question. So I'm gonna go to the question from the audience. So you guys can keep your questions coming. Everyone, and I think I already have 2 questions, so I'm gonna read those out loud to you. So this is from Oleg. Ifeanyi, are you progressing with Igbo language? Do you think knowing language is a part of understanding the nuances or the big things about African culture and arts? That's the first question.
That's an interesting question, Oleg. Thank you. I think I'm not progressing with Igbo language at all, and it's not for lack of trying at different points over the years. That's the truth. Igbo is complicated because in some ways it's a dying language. It's when I go to Nigeria, there's many people who are living there in my family who don't speak it, were not taught it. Who are not being spoken to in Igbo at home. And it's because of the dominance of English and the functionality of English. You need English to study, you need English to work. And so the priority is to learn English when you're growing up, when you're studying. My parents didn't speak Igbo to me or my siblings growing up, obviously because we were in the States, and they're fluent English speakers. I'm not even sure. I can't remember what my parents' first languages are. I think my mom's, I'm not sure about my mom's. I'm pretty sure my dad's is Igbo. But it's not even, there's not even an obvious answer to that question because of the ubiquity of English. And I remember asking my mom why she and my dad didn't speak to us in Igbo. And she said, well, we speak to each other in English. We didn't need to speak to you in English. We're in the US, and so I've tried to learn it at different times. Actually, when I first went to Yale, there was an Igbo class that I took for a year, and then it got canceled for, the usual reasons, probably lack of funds. And there were only 4 of us in the class. So they probably just thought, it's not that important. And then I think I've tried different Igbo programs over the years, but I think the only way I'll learn is through immersion. And I would love to, and I'm planning to at some point, go to the village and spend my 6 months. And I'm actually great with languages. So I'm confident just, spending a concentrated period there, whether it's 6 months or 3 months or a year, I'll learn Igbo. But do I think it's important for getting at the nuance that I'm interested in getting at in terms of contemporary African arts and culture? I think all the artists that I work with work in English, at least most of the time. That's not necessarily a good or bad thing. And I also want to acknowledge that there are a lot of artists who work in French and Spanish, and lots of other languages that I don't work with as much, partly because I'm an English speaker, but I'm aware that there is a need to engage African artists from a range of language traditions. And yes, I think that if I understood Igbo, especially because it's Igbo and because it's such a poetic language and such a proverbial and playful language, there's a lot of nuance just in terms of understanding like the Igbo worldview that I would have access to if I spoke it. Whether I would use that in my work as a curator, I don't know. I would definitely be able to use it in speaking to my parents and relating to my extended family in a certain way. But yeah, it doesn't feel necessary for my work as my practice stands now. That could change, but yeah, sadly, because of English, I'm going to blame English. Igbo is not as dominant as it may need to be to cause me to create a sense of urgency around learning it.
Yeah, that's very Anglophone person perspective. As a non-Anglophone who learned English, who had to speak English, I'll just say that. Another question coming from Oleg is, what are you feeling about the current protests in Nigeria? Is that question for Ifeanyi or for both of us? Because we're both Nigerians, so.
I'm actually going to pass it to you, because I get questions like this sometimes, and I'm like, I've seen too many, and this goes back to what we were saying about having the right thing to say. So it's partly that in my head, like I've seen too many people speak on things in an area that they don't work in and get things wrong. I'm not an activist. I don't live in Nigeria. I'm not really steeped in politics or protest in Nigeria, or I'm not that steeped in, for example, electoral politics anywhere, not even in the US where I'm from and where I live. So I don't feel that it would be productive for me to try to answer this question. So I don't know if you have thoughts that you want to share, my dear.
Oh, wow. I like the way you did this. I think people should do this more often. Pass on the questions if you don't have the expertise or the experience to answer the question as nuanced as you feel you can.
Yeah.
I don't live in Nigeria. I just come. I literally tweeted about this today, that we need to deconstruct and destabilize the diaspora savior syndrome of, oh, I know what's best for Nigeria when I don't live in Nigeria. I don't live in Nigeria. When I go to Nigeria, I move through Nigeria with very certain privileges that I can't speak to the everyday Nigerian experiences. And I don't have a right to speak to that experience. And I think knowing that is also knowing when to move, when to step out and step back and amplify the people that are there. Like my work right now is to amplify people's tweets, people's picture, and document as much as I can and amplify and share my views about what people say about Nigerian situation. But of course, the issue of police brutality is eminent, and we all see it in every part of the world. And also that I just want people to remember that Nigeria is a fascist state, period. It's a colonial project that failed, and it's a fascist state, and fascist states do use the police to terrorize their citizens. So that's what's going on, and I'm very beyond inspired to see Nigerian youth come forward and do their thing in protest, coming from a country that is very much big on protest culture, Greece. We won a big trial yesterday where my friend was killed 7 years ago, and the trial was won yesterday that yes, they were guilty. And I think that I see people, young people moving throughout the world doing things like this. The trial that was won yesterday in Greece was something that we were processing for 7 years and pushing and going to court and doing all the legislative work that is necessary for that. So Nigerian youth out on the street, that's the first step. And they've been out on the street for years. Nigerians have been active for years. But who am I to speak to the Nigerian experience when I live in my beautiful experience of Brussels, London, Athens? It's not my place. It's not my voice that needs to be heard right now.
Yes. And I think this relates to something I've been thinking about a lot, which is a huge part of my work as well. Like, we need more representation of whatever we want to call us, Nigerians who are also abroad, Nigerians who were born there but raised elsewhere, Nigerians who are born in the US. Like, I feel like when people hear the word Nigerian, they think of they put you in this, they put you on the continent, you know, and in a way, yes, we're all one people, but in another very important way, we're not. You know what I mean? I think, like, you know, I am Nigerian, but I'm not. You know, at the same time. So just like you said, for the experience of being on the continent, I can speak to a different Nigerian experience, but I don't blame people for not knowing that experience. It is tricky when I imagine we've had similar situations maybe where I've said I'm Nigerian before, and people have said things like, "Oh, well, how do you speak English so well?" Which is many layers of ignorance at play. Or, you know, they start telling me about the places they've traveled to in Nigeria, and I have to be like, "Dude, I'm from Atlanta," like, because it's that. But I think we need more representation of, you know, you can read, and I think we can read a Nigerian who has an American accent and maybe a British passport. Like, if you're exposed, you can read people's localities, you can read people's experience in a certain way. A lot of people hear Nigerian and there's one experience that comes to mind. So I just really want to find ways of representing the experience of, I don't know what to call. I honestly don't know what to call it. I don't want to say global Nigerians or global Africans or Afropolitans, like, God forbid. But we need language for the experience of those of us who are in diaspora in different ways. You know.
Yeah, I love the God forbid after Afropolitan. I really love it. We will talk about this later separately. But yes, I think it's knowing that there is a multitude and multiplicity of identity of being Nigerian. Like, when I speak as a Nigerian Greek person, I'm mostly speaking of as an Afropean. My idea of Nigeria is the idea my parents passed to me, is the ideas I get when I go on holiday, is my body's ideas. It's not the same thing.
Right.
And I think we need to speak, because I feel like, yes, there are spaces where I remember and realize that I have more privilege and are able to speak about certain things. Like when we talked about the queer lives of Nigerian queer people, I'm like, yes, I can speak and there is nothing that can happen. Whereas different if person who is still like trying to protect themselves, who is Nigerian, will talk about those topics. So I'm also like, be contextual about when we speak about places. Like, speaking about Nigerian American experience could come easily to you, or Nigerian who just moved through the world in different spaces, and multi-local. That's what I call myself, a multi-local person, also Nigerian. It's very different, but yeah, that's a good question though. So thank you. I think it creates a way for us to understand also that it's okay to be multi-local, and also know when to step back and when to step forward. There's just that. So the next thing, I'm still like, if people have more questions for Ifeanyi, this will be the perfect time. Otherwise, we will go to colorful endings.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wait for a minute. Do you all have any more questions that you want to ask Ifeanyi before we leave?
Let me know. Moment of truth.
This is the moment of truth. Otherwise, you will have to like go through like agents. I don't know. There just have to be more gatekeepers. Like, we need more gatekeepers to this source of energy and this source of creativity that exists with Ifeanyi. So I'm gonna go to colorful ending. So colorful ending is where I highlight you as a person and tell you all the things that you have inspired in me, in the communities that I've seen you, and I've talked to people within my community about who you are, your being, your word, but most especially who I feel that my ancestors have guided me to talk to you about yourself. So colorful ending for Ifeanyi. Thank you so much for coming on the talk. Thank you for sharing a part of yourself that is precious to you. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your energy. Thank you for the work that you do in spaces and places that don't even understand or comprehend your value and your worth. And thank you for always showing up 100%. Thank you for making space without even knowing, but also knowingly, consciously making space, intentionally creating space that is necessary, that is needed, that is nurturing. Thank you for who you are. And I'm very blessed to have you in my orbit, to orbit in this life together with you, to live life with you in a way that you're creating. I see what you create and I appreciate what you create, and I intellectually and creatively engage with those, and they help me create new ideas. So your ideas are birthing ideas in me. So thank you for that. And I pray that God, the universe, the ancestors will forever bring people to you to open path of joy. It won't be peer pressure, but it will be path of joy, path of intentionality, path that guides you towards the spaces that nurture you, towards the people that care for you and pour deeply into your being, into your honesty, into everything that you want to create from a place of love and compassion. So thank you so much for everything. And I do not take you for granted. I don't take your space for granted. I take nothing for granted, and I appreciate you deeply, deeply. And I would like to say thank you to everyone in the audience and to the people that might be watching this video later on. Thank you for your time, because your time is your energy and it's currency, and you decide to share that with us today. So thank you.
Thank you so, so much. That was so special. Thank you. It's even hard to, like, as much as I was saying amen to everything you said, I know it's so important to claim it, and I believe it. And at the same time, it's too, like, it feels too good to be true to hear someone say that I have that kind of impact on them. But you know, like I said before the call, I just feel like we have such a rich interaction, and your energy has been so rich and so nourishing to me from the beginning of our time living together, as you say, online. And so I appreciate you so much. The feeling is very, very mutual. And yes, I claim these blessings. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. And thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for the space. And thank you for coming, because your energy created the space, and your questions and your being here created the space. And yes, this is the beginning of many, many beautiful things.
Yes.
And the colorfulness that we share this evening will continue to go into our weekends, but also into our life with more color. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Yay! I love when Igbo energy and Yoruba energy mix together to create magic. Because that's what we are. Like
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you too, my countrywoman. There's something very, I feel like there's something very Yoruba about what you did at the end. Because I have another friend who hails me in that way as well, who's a Yoruba woman. Yes, just this way of speaking over people. It's beautiful. I mean, it was poetry and a prayer, and I'm gonna be claiming it. It's gonna be a process of claiming it, because I want it to really sit here. So thank you so much. I appreciate the depth of what you just did.
Thank you. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you. So thank you so much, Ifeanyi. I'll chat to you later on WhatsApp, but thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for coming. See you.